You want a raw, honest breakdown of what's happening with the Blue Jays right now? Let me tell you something that's keeping every single person in Toronto up at night. We're standing at a crossroads, and I'm not talking about some minor offseason decision here. This is the kind of moment that defines what this franchise becomes for the next 5, maybe 10 years. And it all comes down to two names that couldn't be more different, yet somehow feel perfectly connected by fate itself. Roki Sasaki just got posted, and suddenly the entire baseball landscape shifted. Every contender is scrambling, every front office is making calls, and the Blue Jays find themselves in a position they haven't been in for a long time. Real opportunity, not the kind where you're hoping a veteran takes a discount to come play in Canada. No, this is different. This is about being in the room when generational talent becomes available, and actually having a legitimate shot at landing him. But here's where it gets complicated, where the story twists into something that feels almost too perfectly scripted to be real. Bo Bichette still hasn't answered that qualifying offer, $22 million sitting on the table, and silence. Complete silence. The deadline's coming, and with every day that passes, the possibilities multiply in ways that make your head spin. Think about what's actually happening here. The Blue Jays have been built around a certain core for years now. Vladimir Guerrero Jr., Bo Bichette, these were supposed to be the faces of the franchise for a decade. The homegrown heroes who would bring championships back to Canada. And they came close, didn't they? One swing away, like the opening said. One moment from changing everything, but they didn't get there. And now we're forced to ask the hard questions. Is this core enough? Can this group as constructed actually win it all? Or is it time to acknowledge that sometimes you need to make painful decisions to move forward? That's what makes the Sasaki posting so intense right now, because if Bo walks, if he decides that $22 million isn't enough, or that he wants to test free agency next year, the Blue Jays suddenly have room, financial flexibility, a spot in the lineup that screams for exactly what Sasaki brings: elite talent, youth, upside that most teams would mortgage half their farm system to acquire. Except in this case, there's no trade package required, just money, development infrastructure, and the ability to convince a 23-year-old phenom that Toronto is where he wants to build his legacy. Let me paint the picture of what Sasaki actually is, because the hype is real and it's justified. We're talking about a pitcher who threw a perfect game in Japan, who hit 102 miles per hour on the radar gun consistently, who has a splitter that makes professional hitters look like they're swinging at a ball falling off a table. This isn't some aging veteran looking for one last payday. This is a young ace in the making, the kind of arm that changes the entire complexion of a pitching rotation. Put him with Kevin Gausman, add in Jose Barrios on a good year, and suddenly you've got something that looks like a playoff rotation. The kind that can actually win in October when every pitch matters. But the Blue Jays aren't alone in this chase, and that's the brutal reality we have to face. The Dodgers are going to be in this. Of course they are. They're in everything. The Padres will make a push because they've already proven they can successfully integrate Japanese stars. The Cubs need pitching desperately and have money to spend. The Mets with Steve Cohen's endless wallet. The list goes on, and every single one of those teams has something to offer that Toronto has to match or exceed. Weather's not on their side. Market size isn't either when you're competing with Los Angeles or New York. Tax situation definitely doesn't help when you're asking someone to give up 40% of their earnings. So what's the pitch? What makes Toronto the destination when Sasaki and his representatives sit down to evaluate their options? It starts with opportunity, real immediate opportunity. The Blue Jays aren't rebuilding. They're not asking him to be patient while they develop prospects. They've got a window right now, today, and he'd be walking into a situation where his impact is felt immediately. That rotation would instantly become one of the best in the American League. The lineup, even if Bo leaves, still has Vladdy crushing baseballs, still has George Springer providing veteran presence, still has pieces that can score runs. This isn't a project. This is a team that's ready to win now, and Sasaki would be the catalyst that pushes them over the edge. Then there's the development angle, and this is where it gets interesting. The Blue Jays have one of the best pitching development systems in baseball. They've shown they can take arms and maximize their potential. They've invested heavily in technology, in analytics, in understanding the biomechanics of pitching at an elite level. For a young pitcher coming from Japan, that infrastructure matters. It's not just about the money, it's about knowing you're going to have every possible resource to reach your ceiling and maybe even exceed it. Toronto can sell that narrative legitimately because they've proven it works. The Canadian market itself is unique in ways that might actually appeal to someone like Sasaki. Yes, it's cold. Yes, it's a different country with customs and immigration complexities. But it's also a market that's absolutely starved for success, where a player can become an instant icon in ways that might take years in a bigger American city. The fan base is passionate, knowledgeable, and loyal to a fault. They'll embrace a star completely. And for someone building their brand internationally, that kind of devotion has value. Toronto isn't New York or Los Angeles, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes being the biggest fish in a slightly smaller pond creates opportunities you can't find elsewhere. Now let's get back to Bo, because his decision is the domino that makes everything else possible or impossible. If he accepts that qualifying offer, the Blue Jays are committing $22 million to shortstop for next season. That's money that doesn't go to Sasaki. That's a roster spot that's filled. It means the team is running it back with essentially the same core, banking on internal improvement and maybe a couple of smaller additions to push them over the top. There's logic to that approach. Bo's still young, he's still talented, and when he's locked in, he's one of the better shortstops in baseball. The defense has improved, the bat plays. Keeping that continuity, maintaining that chemistry, that matters. But what if he says no? What if Bo looks at that $22 million and thinks he can do better on the open market in a year? Or what if he just wants out, wants a fresh start somewhere else, wants to see what life looks like outside of Toronto? Then everything changes. Suddenly the Blue Jays have financial flexibility they didn't have before. Suddenly that shortstop position is open, and while that creates a hole defensively, it also creates opportunity. Opportunity to reshape the roster in ways that might make them better overall, even if it hurts to lose a face of the franchise. That's where someone like Munetaka Murakami enters the conversation, and I know the script mentioned him, but let's be real about what that would mean. Murakami's a legitimate middle-of-the-order bat. 56 home runs in a season isn't a fluke. That's elite power. He's 25 years old, entering his prime, and represents exactly the kind of impact bat that can protect Vladdy in the lineup. If Bo leaves and the Blue Jays pivot to Murakami, you're talking about a very different offensive identity. More power, potentially less speed and defense, but the kind of run production that can overwhelm opponents. Pair that with Sasaki on the mound, and suddenly you're building something that looks completely different than what we've seen the last few years. The reality is the Blue Jays are at a decision point that requires courage. Not the safe courage of running it back and hoping for better results. Real courage, the kind that acknowledges when it's time to pivot, when it's time to take calculated risks that might blow up in your face, but also might deliver the championship this city's been waiting for since 1993. That's a long time. That's an entire generation of fans who've never seen the Blue Jays win it all. The pressure to deliver isn't just about wins and losses anymore. It's about validating decades of loyalty from people who deserve better than perpetual playoff disappointments. Here's what keeps me up at night, what I think should keep every Blue Jays fan up at night. What if this is it? What if this offseason right now is the moment where the franchise either commits to winning or slides back into mediocrity for another decade? Baseball windows close faster than anyone wants to admit. Vladdy's going to be a free agent soon. The pitching staff is another year older. The division got harder with Baltimore emerging as a powerhouse, and the Yankees always being the Yankees. Tampa's going to Tampa and somehow compete with a $70 million payroll. This isn't a forgiving environment where you can afford to waste seasons hoping things click. That's why the Sasaki pursuit feels so critical. It's not just about adding a good pitcher. It's about signaling intent. It's about telling the baseball world that Toronto isn't content being a fringe playoff team, that they're serious about building something sustainable, something that can actually compete for championships year after year. Landing Sasaki would be a statement signing, the kind that changes how players view the organization. Suddenly, you're not just another team, you're a destination. You're a place where elite talent wants to be, and that creates momentum that builds on itself. But the competition is fierce, and we can't ignore that. The Dodgers just won another World Series. They've got Shohei Ohtani and Yoshinobu Yamamoto already, which means they can pitch the whole Japanese star package deal. Come join your countrymen, win championships, live in Los Angeles. That's a compelling narrative that's hard to counter. San Diego has Yu Darvish, has shown they'll spend, and has weather that makes Toronto's winners look even worse by comparison. Chicago offers a massive market and a team desperate to return return to relevance. Every single one of these teams has advantages Toronto doesn't. So what's the Blue Jays' trump card? What's the one thing they can offer that nobody else can? It's the vision of being the guy, not another piece, not a complimentary star, but the centerpiece of a new era. In Los Angeles, you're always sharing the spotlight with someone. In Toronto, Sasaki could be the name that defines the next decade. He could be the one who brought championship baseball back to Canada. That's legacy stuff, the kind of narrative that transcends money and weather and all the practical considerations. Some players want that. Some players want to be remembered as the one who changed everything, and Toronto offers that opportunity in ways bigger markets with more established stars simply can't. The financial side is going to be fascinating too, because Sasaki's posting operates under international signing pool rules, which means the actual contract is capped. Teams can't just outbid each other with massive deals like they would for a regular free agent. That theoretically levels the playing field, makes it more about fit and development and opportunity than pure dollars. But the reality is, teams will find ways to make their offers attractive. Endorsement opportunities, marketing deals, long-term extensions after the initial contract. The creative structuring that happens behind the scenes to make one offer more valuable than another. Toronto's front office has to be thinking about all of this right now. Every conversation, every pitch to Sasaki's camp has to be perfect. You don't get second chances with players like this. Say the wrong thing, emphasize the wrong aspects, and suddenly you're out of the running before you really got started. But nail the pitch, show him exactly how he fits, and why Toronto's the place where he can become everything he's capable of becoming. And maybe, just maybe, you land the kind of talent that changes franchise trajectory. Let's talk about what the rotation looks like if they actually pull this off. Sasaki at the top, that electric arm and devastating splitter. Kevin Gausman, who's been remarkably consistent and gives you innings you can count on. Jose Barrios when he's on his game. Then you've got Yusei Kikuchi back for another year. And suddenly you've got depth that can withstand injuries and inconsistency. That's a playoff rotation. That's the kind of staff that can go toe-to-toe with the best in the American League and come out on top. Add in a bullpen that has some pieces, and the pitching suddenly goes from question mark to potential strength. Offensively, even without Bo, there's still firepower. Vladdy's not going anywhere unless something dramatic happens, and he's still one of the most dangerous hitters in baseball when he's locked in. Springer provides veteran leadership and clutch hitting. If Murakami or another bat comes in to fill the power void, the lineup maintains its punch. The question becomes defense and speed, whether losing Bo's range at short costs more runs than the offense gains. That's the calculation the front office has to make, the cold mathematical reality of baseball where you're constantly balancing competing needs and hoping your decisions pan out. The emotional side can't be ignored either, because sports isn't just spreadsheets and statistics. Bo Bichette means something to Toronto fans. He's been here through the rebuilding, through the emergence, through the heartbreaking playoff exits. Watching him potentially walk away hurts in ways that transcend baseball logic, but sometimes growth requires pain. Sometimes you have to let go of what's comfortable to reach for something better. That's not a criticism of Bo or what he's meant to the organization. It's just the reality of building a championship contender in modern baseball. The next few weeks are going to be absolutely critical. Bo's decision comes first, and that sets everything else in motion. If he accepts, the Blue Jays pivot to plan B, whatever that looks like. If he declines, the Sasaki pursuit intensifies, and the roster construction shifts dramatically. Either way, decisions are being made right now that will echo for years. That's the nature of off seasons in professional sports. These concentrated periods where franchise futures get decided in boardrooms and negotiation sessions far from the field. What I keep coming back to is the sense of urgency. Toronto can't afford another wasted year. The core isn't getting younger. The division isn't getting easier. The window everyone talks about, it's not closed yet, but you can see it starting to move. That creates pressure, but it also creates clarity. No more half measures. No more hoping things work out. This is the moment where you commit fully, where you make the moves that might scare you, but also might deliver everything you've been working toward. Sasaki represents hope, the tangible kind that makes fans believe again, not blind optimism, but legitimate excitement based on talent and potential, and the very real possibility of landing someone special. That's what makes this offseason different. It's not about patchwork solutions or minor upgrades. It's about potentially transformative additions that change how we think about this team's ceiling. And whether it's Sasaki or someone else, whether Bo stays or goes, the Blue Jays have to emerge from this winter looking like a team that's serious about winning now, not eventually. So where does this leave us? Standing at the edge of possibility, watching as decisions unfold that will shape the next era of Blue Jays baseball. The optimism is real because the opportunities are real, but so is the risk, so is the chance that this all falls apart and we're left wondering what could have been. That's the nature of being a fan though, living in that space between hope and heartbreak, believing even when logic says you shouldn't, investing emotionally in outcomes you can't control. The Blue Jays have a chance here, a genuine chance to do something special. Land Sasaki, figure out the Bo situation in whatever way makes the team better. Add pieces around the core that already exists, and suddenly 2025 looks like it could be the year everything finally clicks. But it requires execution, requires the front office to be bold and smart and maybe a little lucky. It requires Sasaki seeing what Toronto offers and choosing it over easier options. It requires all the pieces falling into place in ways that rarely happen, but sometimes do. That's what we're watching for. That's what keeps Blue Jays Nation engaged even in November when there's no games being played. Because we know these moves matter. We know that what happens in the next month could determine whether we're celebrating a championship or lamenting another near miss 2 years from now. The stakes are that high, the decisions are that important, and the passion from fans is that intense because this is our team, our city, our hope for something better. And right now, with Sasaki available and Bo's future uncertain and possibilities swirling, anything feels possible. That's a powerful feeling, and it's one worth holding on to as we watch this all unfold.